just your presentation, correct?
Hello, Eddie's. Meeting starting. Meeting starting. Okay. All right, next up on the agenda is employee new hire recognition. Alan Osmond from Finance, Andrew Rivers to introduce.
New Mayor and Council, I'm excited to introduce our new business license administrator, Ms. Belinda Rivers. Excited to have her here. She went to school here in Beaufort, and she was working for the state of Tennessee in their licensing department. Now she's back here, so I'm excited to have her join our team, and she's been doing a great job with us so far. So I'll be she's here with us.
Welcome to the team.
Great to have you.
Thank you. Okay, it's Chief Price here. You got a couple of people.
Yeah, great, folks. Mayor and Council, thanks for having us this evening. I'd like to introduce to you this evening David Chapelier, and he actually graduated from Bluffton High School. So he's a Low Country resident that you have work in the police department. Excited to have him and have him policing his community. Beside him is Braden Beck. He is also from our Low Country here, as he graduated from Bridges, and he's a local business owner. We are glad to have someone that is from our country and communication, our community, in our community helping police it. And on the end is Andrew Martin. Now, he has vast law enforcement experience. He's from Florida. He's been in SWAT and BOMB and done many things in many different police departments. So we're grateful for his guidance. This is tonight's recruits. Thank you all.
Hey, Council, I'd like to introduce real quick Miss Jenna Wilson. She's the new hire to our Parks Division. She's hit the ground running, very attention to detail. She's going to help us out tremendously in our Parks Department. She comes from California and brings along with her 5 daughters.
Welcome aboard, you're welcome. Okay, next up, we'll have a discussion item, gentleman agreement, National Park Service, in South Carolina.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, good evening. We have with us this evening Laura Waller, who is the superintendent of the reconstruction of our national park here. based in the city of Beaufort. She's bringing to you an agreement for discussion at this point, to hear your concerns and to give her an opportunity to explain the necessity behind having some formal agreement or some differences between our standard operating procedures regarding tour companies and National Park Service. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Laura.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, thank y'all for having me. I just want to, I have just a few slides to kind of go over how we ended up here today. So I think that's probably, sir, thank you. So it was, I'm relatively new here. I've been with the Park Service for 13 years, but I've been here in Beaufort since January. And it was brought to my attention not long after I got here that the walking tours that we offer within the National Historic Landmark District, again, we're based out of the old firehouse on Craven Street. They're not consistent with existing city ordinances regarding commercial walking tours. And those involve things like limits on numbers, liability insurance, getting a license, like a tour guide license and a background check, those sorts of things. And so to make sure that we're, operating in our best faith with the city as a partner, we want to get consistent so that we're all on the same page. And that's really my goal is that we're just all on the same page. Everybody has the same understanding of what we're doing here. And then we don't operate on private property. I want to make that super clear. I especially wanted to do that because photo is on private property, but we do have separate agreements with property owners in downtown that do allow us to go onto their property. First African Baptist and Tabernacle are the two that come immediately to mind. Next, please. We also recently just completed a general management plan. I signed the finding of no significant impact just a few weeks ago. This is really tiny, I'm sorry, but I wanted to pull out the excerpt. I wish I had copies for everyone, but they only sent me a couple printed copies of the general management plan and its relationship to the city of Beaufort and its strategy to work with the city. So a couple of things that are key is that these strategies are dependent on partners for execution. So exactly why I'm sitting here today. And that, tours that interpret Reconstruction era history in downtown Beaufort can be done through lots of ways, through commercial operators, through partnerships, and then through Park Service employees. And that we want to make sure, and that's that last sentence or so there, that ensure NPS-led tours would not inappropriately compete with commercial tour operations. And that it would account for neighborhood perspectives, and that we would work with the city and or commercial operators to ensure that tour sizes don't exceed visitor capacities for those areas of property. So that's really why I'm here, is to make sure that we're abiding by this document, this general management plan that I just signed a few weeks ago. Next slide, please. So a couple specific issues on how the commercial ordinances and how we are currently operating are not quite jiving. We don't carry liability insurance. We're self-insured, so we use the federal tort claim process, which does the same thing. It's just not the same thing as insurance. Commercial tour operators are required to be licensed by the city and get a background check. We're not doing that. We have, our employees have a federal background check, so there's some consistency issues there where we don't exactly match what the ordinances are saying. We don't charge for our tours, which means we don't take reservations. And so occasionally they exceed, and they have exceeded. I have some data on the next slide with how often that is, the 20 participant rule, which is what's in the ordinances. So that's something I'd like to strategize on how we might figure out how to manage that. Because internally the Park Service doesn't have a reservation system that's free. We have to charge to do that, and we're not charging since again we're not a commercial operator. And then the ordinance only allows for a certain number of commercial operators to operate within the city, and currently we're taking one of those slots, which is, in my understanding, not a huge deal for right now. But in theory, we could be competing with a small business, and that's not what we want to do either. Is hold a slot that the city is designated for a commercial operator. Next, please. And then just some quick statistics. So in fiscal year 23, and our fiscal year runs October of the year prior to September, We started tracking, roughly where our downtown tours were going. We offer them twice a day at 11 and 2 p.m. Except on Sundays where we just do an afternoon program, and we didn't have a 7-day operation until very recently back in the spring. So most of this data is just Tuesday through Saturday for 2 programs a day. In 23, we started tracking where those were going, but before that, we didn't do that. So that's why you'll see blanks on the bottom part of the screen there. The 2 that we started tracking in particular were walking towards the Entered the Point neighborhood, and walking tours that went to the Robert Smalls property. And you can see all that data there. A lot of that dropped off in fiscal 24, as everybody here, I'm sure, is aware of some issues with that property and our use of that property. So we ceased operations going to that property pretty early in the year. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instances up there on the right side of the screen of where we exceeded 20 participants. One of those was 33 participants from Beaufort Senior Leaders that were on one of our groups. We had a special program in early March that was Black Businesses of Craven Street. They got 35 participants, which was way more than we expected. Typically, when we exceed 20, it's very rare, and that was probably our most attended program. So if we were to continue that, that would be something we would want to consider, is that one did attract a lot of folks. And then typically our average tour group size in the downtown district is about 5 people per tour. And I would say that's pretty regular. I think that tracks also across our regular walking tours on the Penn Center district on St. Helena as well. I believe that is my last slide. So what I've done is I've taken the general agreement template that the National Park Service uses and inserted how we might be more consistent with the ordinances. This was a very rough attempt at this. Thank you, Scott, for noting the working part of this. Just to kind of take a first stab at how we might come together and have consistency, you know, so that we're all on the same page about how the park is operating in the district.
Would anybody like to go first, or I'll go if you want me to? I've got a lot of issues.
Okay, I can start, because I don't have too many. So one, you guys don't charge for your tours, right?
Correct.
So if I'm reading our ordinance correctly, it is specifically for hire.
Correct.
So that would not include you, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm not sure why the request to be exempt from like a commercial business license, because by default, you really already are, because our ordinance is governing those for hire. I'm not saying that we don't need to add an ordinance to govern tours that are not for hire, but I just don't know why an exemption for that is necessary. The only concerns that I have are related to the prior approval portion of this agreement on page 8C. Says the partner being the city, must obtain prior written approval from the National Park Service before holding special events within the park. 1, 2, entering into third-party agreements materially related to this agreement. 2, 3, assigning and transferring this agreement or any part thereof. 4, constructing any structure or making any improvements within the park's boundaries. 5, releasing any public information that refers to the department, the National Park Service, the park, any National Park Service employee by name or title, this agreement or the responsibilities and understanding of the parties described in this agreement. So 1, I don't know why the city would need written approval from the National Park Service, but I guess I need clarification on what defines within the park, because if I look at the map here, I would almost be led to believe that it would be anything inside of this interpretive priority areas 1, 2, and 3. Is that correct or no?
That's not correct.
Okay.
So this is, again, this is template language, and so a lot of times when we do these, general agreements are very broad. They're based on our authority in 54 USC and the laid forth in the Organic Act, and they're not the strongest of agreements. We also have another legal instrument called a cooperative management agreement that is a lot more thorough and we can do those with other government entities. I'm actually seeking to do that. We have a general agreement with Fort Royal, with the town of Fort Royal, and I'm seeking to get them into a cooperative management agreement because it'll give us a little bit more specificity and what we can and can't do, because this is templated language, like you pointed out. The park here is only referring to what we own in fee. So literally that would be the boundary of the 2 buildings that we own within downtown, which are 913 West Street and 706 Craven.
Because I found your foundation document, and in there was a map, and then it says park boundary, and then it gives the boundary to be just around the building. So that makes more sense, but that's where I was getting a little confused there, is I was thinking, well, if we're gonna have to come for permission to the National Park Service to utilize, anything within these priority areas, that's not gonna work. So, yep, so that's clear. I can pause there, and then as we continue, something else becomes more relevant, I'll ask, but those are my concerns.
And I can also, I'm putting a comment in for myself. I can check in with our folks that manage these at the regional level and see how we can go about even striking stuff from the template language that doesn't really apply in this particular situation. Because typically it's a partner working within a park, and in this case, it's a park working within a district. Exactly,
yeah.
within a partner. So
Right.
it's a little unusual for our standard document template.
Okay.
Those are my concerns also. Also about it, the motor coach, you could be using the motor coach in the Old Point area, or,
No,
okay, the way it reads, it almost looks like you're going to be.
give me
So
a.
I read it as if you guys were highlighting ensure consistency with the city ordinance relating to walking tour operations. As if that's what we were discussing here.
Yeah, they highlighted.
Okay, well, it's regulate bus, motor coach traffic to protect private.
Where are you reading?
City of Beaufort,
Objectives.
number 3, the objective. I'm just looking there, and it almost looked like when you see motor coach and historic homes, it don't mix. That's what I was worried about. It's right there in the beginning.
So that was one of the items that was brought to my attention, is where we unload buses that are visiting 706 Craven Street, and that there's the city has designated bus areas. So that line was just to say introductory, the city is, has these ordinances to protect private residences, and we want to be consistent with that and make sure that our buses are unloading where you are us to unload. So we can definitely clarify that to make that more
Okay,
clear.
and then talked about benches in there, where exactly, it says about to put benches where you want to. It's somewhere in there, I don't
It
remember
was
where
right,
it was.
it didn't say that necessarily, but it's right here in the
It was
category.
within the park area, or which,
The strategy description category, expanded interpretation, that's where we're talking about.
In the general management agreement.
It says in these areas, park staff would focus on expanded interpretive efforts and work with the city and partners to establish consistent interpretive waysides, pedestrian amenities, e.g. benches, tour stops, wayfinding, and tour operations. Is that what you were?
yes, it is.
Yeah.
I think the key language there is work.
Right.
And those sorts of things are beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here. We're right now just trying to it's almost going backwards a little bit. We're trying to get consistent with what we're already doing, and then anything we would do in the future, again, like interpretive signage, waysides, wayfinding, all that sort of stuff, we revisit.
Okay, so another thing, when the regular tours, when they're given tours, whether it be horse and carriage, golf cart or walking tours, they're not allowed to stop in front of a residence, you know, to tell about it, they have to keep moving. But yet y'all stop in front of residences, I've seen.
We do, for sure. We don't go on private property, but we try to stay, we're in the sidewalk. I know that they try to shuffle to the side to make sure that pedestrians can still safely have ingress and egress or move around, or they'll stand on a corner or something like
The
that.
other tour companies aren't allowed to do it.
Can walking tours, commercial walking tours stop, or do they have to keep moving?
They have to keep moving, I believe.
Yeah.
Are there anyone else that does walking
tours
tours except the national park?
There are 3 other vendors, I believe, is that right?
Linda, don't they have to keep moving?
Not walking tours are not,
Okay,
they can stop.
okay, I'm mistaken.
I have a general question.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I have a general question. Are you, I guess what initiated this request or are you just trying to be proactive and get ahead of some things?
So, Linda's office got in touch with, I think, all folks that operate walking tours to just reiterate some of the ordinances, and when we got those, we're like, well, technically, you know, local government ordinances don't apply, and also, we wanna be good faith partners in making sure that we're good neighbors and that we're operating consistent with the ordinances to the best of our ability that we can as being different than a commercial operator. And so we sat down in the spring and talked about it and came up with the idea that we could potentially do it under a general agreement. I'll talk to Scott a little bit. So it was just sort of, you know, making sure you're not using loudspeaker devices, which I think some of our folks had done once or twice, and we totally stopped that. That was an easy one to do. Things like I think the Black businesses of Craven Street got some attention because it had 35 participants on it. So I have a feeling that someone had commented on that one in particular. Just things like that had come up. I don't think just specifically with us, but that sort of got me thinking, okay, well, how can we make sure that we're all communicating and having the best understanding that we can.
Are there other cities that are similar to our situation that we could benchmark off to try to see some history of what has worked well for the neighbors?
So there are other places. The one that really comes to mind is Harpersferry, West Virginia, where there are a lot of, it's a historic district. There are a lot of private businesses and residents there, but the Park Service owns a lot more of the historic buildings in the town. They have a lot more assets than we do here in Beaufort. And so I don't know that there's the same kind of model or a place with the same kind of traffic. Another one that I'm thinking of is the city of Calumet, which is in northern Michigan, which is a partnership park. They interpret the district in Calumet, the copper mining industry. And the Park Service owns several of the buildings, but works with partners to manage the entire district. But it's a very, very small town, so it's not quite the same scale. And there's not the same kind of tourism interests like what are happening here in Beaufort. So I've also lived in Savannah. And you know, the Park Service doesn't have a presence in the downtown. It's outside in a much more traditional drive through a gate, you're in the park kind of situation. So I think this is new. But I can certainly, you know, take a look and see if I can think of other places that have similar kind of situations.
I'm concerned about the number of people, you know, like we require the other commercial people to have limited 20 people. Is there any way you could work to do that? And I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint, because you're gonna be crossing streets, you're gonna be on the sidewalk. That's a lot of people. And I know that the museum, Beaufort History Museum is right across from your interpretive center there, on Firehouse. Could you not split a group if you had like a larger than 20 people and just have some of them go on one or two or bring them back and have the others go and the others could go to the museum or?
So
work on the weekends?
yeah, we do that with school groups. We try to limit them if possible because we have advanced notice. I think with some of these situations, it's something that we are trying to internally explore how we would limit. A lot of times since we don't charge, if people just walk up, you say, no, you know, it's kind of it's an interesting situation, Whereas if you had to have a reservation with a fee, it would be easy to say, okay, you don't have a reservation, you have to go to the visitor center and sign up or do whatever.
You might this is just a suggestion, you might say city ordinance limit tourists to 20, something like that.
Right.
That way it takes the burden off of you.
Right.
It's our city, we take the hit for it.
Right, yeah, and we've definitely, since our meeting in the spring, really worked to make sure that we're keeping track of when those things become provoked. And it's pretty rare, like I said, it's 5 times in the past year, but that's more than y'all, I'm sure, would allow a commercial operator to do that without pulling their spot, so, you know, again, we wanna be considerate of the area, yeah, absolutely.
One other thing I noticed on the map, the Robert Small Town, you have potential acquisition. Is the National Park Service gonna buy it from the National Trust?
So here's where we're at with the Robert Small House. So the initial intention, I believe, was for that to happen, and that's when this document was in draft. So that's why it's listed on there as that. The National Trust has purchased the property since then. They've assumed the legal mediation with the easement that's on the property that Historic Beaufort Foundation holds. And I can honestly say that I don't have any updates on where they're at. As you know, our line is, we're interested in helping anybody that has a reconstruction era resource interpret their property. And that's nationwide. We now manage the Reconstruction Era National Historic Network. We have over 100 sites now. That we're in one way or another helping. Now, fee acquisition, still don't know. And if the opportunity for that were to come up, then there are certain criteria that would have to be met. And obviously there were a lot of legitimate concerns with Park Service acquisition of that property. I want to acknowledge that out loud and say that we would, you know, not move forward with anything that would be stressful on the community, because that's not what we're here to do.
Yes, thank you. Hey Laura, this is Sandra Lilly, we've talked on the phone.
Yeah, hi.
Good to see you. As a matter of fact, and do you want me to stand on this side? I don't know how your camera works. Yeah, there. We are at the final stages of a agreement with the National Trust for public access to the Robert Smalls house. We anticipate in the next few weeks that will be finalized. That document, which we have vetted through Linda Rover, that document would become binding on any future owner, as well as on the operator, the National Park Service. If the operator is the National Park Service, that document would become binding on them as well. So one of the things, and Scott, that's what I was trying to call you about this morning, but we had too many things going on today. So what I was going to suggest, it's Lowell, Massachusetts, where the other scattered site park is. But what I was going to suggest today that might be helpful to us, and I think a lot of other people may agree as well, is that we put this into a kind of a study effort. Let's get through our settlement agreement that we're currently having with the National Trust, which will bind them and will affect public access. And we are making sure that we're currently following the ordinance. So the National Trust is following the ordinance, therefore the National Park Service would be having to follow the ordinance as well in the access to the house. So I would suggest that we hold off. Let's make sure that we've all got our ducks in a row. And also, if there's an opportunity for the public to weigh in, we did share our draft settlement terms with the Friends group, so that they would also be aware of it. And we took their comments into consideration when we put it together. And I think that would also be helpful with this process, but it affects a much larger area. So not just the Friends group, but that it be up for other folks to have comment on as well. So thank you. Yes.
Is that draft available?
No, it's confidential right now until that's released by the National Trust from being confidential. That we can't, but I think what we're waiting on, we just did a joint public press release that we're sort of massaging right now to go out. But we're hopeful that once the papers are fully signed, in the next few weeks, then we can absolutely make it available in public. All right? Thank you so much.
Yeah, 'cause we haven't been part of those discussions at all, so I'm not even aware of what's in there, yeah.
Any other comments?
I guess I'm just trying to figure out how that ties in here because we could still probably benefit from an ordinance that discussed not for hire tours, because all of ours right now are only talking about those that are hired out. So it sounded like that's what this agreement was trying to do, and one of the concerns that was identified a couple of times was, and in here, is define the limits to participants. So if we did that alone and then had an ordinance that would govern tours that were not for hire, I don't know why we'd have to wait until that issue was resolved, right?
I think you could do both.
Yeah,
One could complement the other, right? We could change our ordinances to reflect the exceptions that make sense to be made for National Park Service. I wouldn't just say tours not for hire, that opens it up too broadly. I would be very narrow in the ordinance that it pertains to the reconstruction area national park and the National Park Service operating that park.
Okay.
And then we could make those same, use that same language in the agreement, which I think would satisfy the National Park Service, because it sounds like they're comfortable having those agreements in place. As long as those two things jive, I think we'll be okay.
There was something in here about them having the right to assign another company to run the tours for the, which that was another issue I had. I can't find it now. Yeah, third party.
So I think the third party portions were in the general management plan as an option. That's for us, that's not on the table right now. And that would go into the actual agreement itself.
Okay, so I mean, no tell you, you back away, give it to someone else, don't tell them what's going on.
I agree with you 100%.
You could in your ordinance specifically prohibit.
Yeah.
Them contacting a third party, and then they contacted a third party, the same protections and exceptions will not apply.
Yeah, so at that point, they're a commercial operator, which I, is there.
and it sounds like there was some confusion with ordinances that were talking about riding tours and then ones that were talking about walking tours, because the walking tours, I didn't see anything in there from our ordinance that prevented them from stopping. It was just if they were riding.
I think the idea of stopping a walk, addressing this walking issue and stopping, it's a walking, I don't know how you would do that. It seems kind of borderline ridiculous to me that if you're walking a street, then you're gonna say that person has to constantly walk.
Right.
It just, it just doesn't seem.
It would depend on where they
It
stop.
doesn't seem.
If you stop in somebody's door,
It doesn't
driveway.
seem, well, you're on a street.
If you stop them in the street on somebody's driveway or something like that, that's. a
Well, that's,
problem.
I
Well,
don't,
it's covered in here, they wouldn't block the driveway, and I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a concern for residents or not,
yeah,
but
so,
if that's the concern, then that would be very valid, because that's something that they're not supposed to do, is block driveways.
but isn't that already?
That's already captured in here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think limiting it to 20.
When it's limited to 20, it might be easier.
I guess I
to manage.
I wonder, so at some point in time, it made sense to limit the business licenses to 6. Now, I'm not sure why the National Park Service is holding one of those spots if they're not a commercial business, but I'd also think there'd be benefit to addressing that issue. Maybe they don't have a business license, or maybe you have 5 that you have and they hold 1.
Or they're not part of the limit.
Or they're not part of the limit.
Right. That might be the more
Well, it
practical.
depends on if the reason you enacted that part of the ordinance was to limit the number of groups at any given time and to be sure they work well into the rotation, then it makes sense to make them fit under that cap.
Right.
But if that's not the reason you enacted it, then of course make an exception. I'd have to defer to Linda and the history behind that if you have it. Do you know
Yeah,
that?
she's got history.
I'm sure she does. Fine.
All right, just to clarify the numbers.
and minimizing it. It was all, when TMAC was together and created the ordinances, a lot of it was the consideration of the impact on the, historic district and any kind of activity going on. So the limit was, just as Scott explained, it was like, you know, what is too much? How much is too much? And so they said they felt like 6 is the number of walking tours that the historic district can handle in any given day. If they're all running in a given day, they have to have some sort of rotation. The tour coordinator kind of watches, make sure that the routes don't overlap in certain ways. If we did the 6 and that's what we think we can handle. And actually, this is the first time in the 20 some odd years that I've been doing the tour stuff that we have the limit of 6. It's almost if we added another one, you're gonna feel it. And I think TMAC did a very good job of trying to figure out that. So I think 6 is a good capacity whenever you think that they're about anywhere from 40 to 45-minute tours in at least the commercial sector. Some of them are more than an hour. On an average, it's about 40 minutes that walking tours are walking throughout the historic district, whether it's in the commercial area or if it's in the point area. So if you think about that, and they have to rotate times and not go in at the same time. But that was the whole reason for the 6. National Park Service, when we spoke with Laura in the spring, we were saying, you know, we're getting close. We're going to consider you because we know you have an impact. We're considering you a part of the 6 for right this second. Well, we think we need to have some sort of agreement to figure out where that fits, whether we change our ordinance to kind of help so that we recognize that National Park Service is part of the tours as a whole and the impact as a whole. It doesn't matter whether you're for hire or not, you have an impact to the residents and the entire. So I hope that makes sense.
And just to make sure I understand, and the National Park Service is part of the 6 now.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, we've been considering it part of the 6.
Yeah.
Of course, we have a walking tour company right now that may want to be a part of walking tours. And if they make the application, we're gonna have to make that determination.
Yeah, it would seem to me that, based on your comment that what has been working well so far with 6 that is operating and the National Park Service being a part of that 6, it would seem the practical things to go with what's already working and keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
And if someone else applies, there are no slots.
Exactly. And, I think the other thing to consider when we're talking with National Park Service and understand, we all can make this agreement, but we want to make sure that we all understand it and it's very clear because they have evolved since National Park Service started. They were at one time only doing 1 tour a day. And that was at 11 o'clock. They've added now they've got 11 and 2. We might want to consider how many times everybody's going, at this point, we may even have to talk to may have to start regulating our tours, the other tours, because when you get to 6, we don't really regulate how many go out and around
How long
at one
have we been
time.
doing 6?
Whereas we have a rotation and, excuse me.
How long have we been doing 6 with the 2 that the Park Service operates?
We've only been doing 6 within this past year.
So we have about a year.
We've added 1 commercial and the National Park Service has been in operation since 2020 during COVID, right? Like 19, 20.
Yes, I think our first year of data is 19.
Right, so they've been doing it since 2019, but they really did not start doing the tours until probably 2020. And then,
So the 2 a day, I guess my question, how long have they been doing the 2 a day?
the 2 a day, that would be something Laura may be able to answer.
So that one slide. Trying to see if I can tell in the numbers, yeah, it looks like around 21 is what I'm guessing based on these numbers.
And the first, my question is that if we have data with what we have been doing, that seems to have been working well, why mess with it? I mean, we just let the product be a part of what's been operating already. It's easier to say no to someone who was not already a part of it than to change something that's already operating. The pain will be felt less because that new person, that whatever new they're doing, has not had the experience. So I would suggest, or my comment would be that we kind of work with what has been working and let it run.
I tend to agree, but I think that it can be challenged legally.
Well, I don't doubt that it can be challenged, it probably will be challenged. I guess we're trying to get through something
Right,
that's gonna probably work.
right.
Because I expect it to be challenged.
Anyone else?
And just to answer the question about keeping walking tours, they can stop. They're not supposed to block any driveways or access for any of the residents. If the residents are having that on a consistent basis with any of the tours, please contact our office because we monitor it on a regular basis. Can't be out there the entire time, but they all know how many they can. And all of our walking tours, I do know, we've told them, make sure you know that you can't have more than 20. There are, of course, special events that can be approved. That can be approved for National Park Service. If they know that they've got something a little bit larger, we can actually try to accommodate that for special events. But all of our tour operators, walking tour operators are exactly the same. I can't add anybody else because city has an ordinance. We can only have 20 on an tour at a time, so.
Which is something that was highlighted in here too, it is defined how we will notify the city of anticipated inconsistency with ordinances related to special events.
Yeah, and that, just as any other one, it's in the ordinance that says that you can apply for a special event.
Right.
And same way, and really there's, the science behind that is making sure that nobody else has applied for the same thing, so that you're not having like 50 people at one time going out, and we kind of monitor, we know which tours are running. Not all of them run every single day, so you kind of add that in whenever you're talking about a special event.
So what's the pleasure, we go with what we got?
You got to let the public say anything or?
Yeah, I'll open up to the public. Yeah. Please come up, give me your name and address for the record.
I'm Heather Winch, 309 Federal Street. Much like Councilman McPhee, I had the pleasure of serving on TMAC for an extended period of time. Rewrote the ordinance in 2004, again in 08, and again in 11. So I served an absurdly long time. The 20 limit was there because of crowd control, safety, crowd control, keeping people on sidewalks. It was tweaked. That's when the limits went in terms of number of tours, as Linda knows. The slots, we could have 6 carriage companies, and we had the ongoing carriage wars. We finally got through those, and then TMAC became an ad hoc committee, so it has not actually had an ordinance update since 11. And the ordinance says it should be reviewed every 3 years. So you might need to name an ad hoc committee. I'm unavailable. A lot of history, but I'm unavailable.
Existing name committee is just reappointed.
Excellent. So I just wanted to point out the reasoning behind the 20. It was relating to the overall flow of what was going in. I also have a question relating to the motor coach because there were designated areas for motor coaches being able to stop. And just as an aside, it might be a good time to revisit because a lot of the coaches have now become carts, golf carts. So there's been a dramatic change in the flow going through the historic district in terms of where we're crossing. We're gonna have all sorts of new adventures when the King Street project starts, which is gonna mean a full-time job for somebody downtown. And so if you have any questions on the history of the ordinance, I think between Mike and I, we can probably fill you in on them. I'd be happy to answer any questions as if you decide to go back and revisit the ordinance. But it was purely a safety issue on the 20. Yes, there have been people who've gone over the limit before. And there are special permits, as Linda had mentioned. There also is a not-for-profit designation for special events, for example, for the ghost tours every year. So all of those things were sort of put out in the ordinance with the idea that there'd be flexibility and can be adjusted as need be. So anyway, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good to see you guys again. Dave Russell, 411 Craven Street, also known as the Castle. One of the reasons we bought the house was absolutely love the history. Some folks have been in our house. I mean, there's soldier signatures in the house, and we love the history. And we've had good interactions with the National Park Service. We've had rangers over to kind of look at things, identify the soldiers' names who were on our walls, and told us some pretty neat things about the outbuilding and everything. So I think, we're all for certainly what the Park Service is doing. But I will say, first of all, I don't know why the city would want to enter into this agreement. It's essentially, you're giving up rights to litigate the way you might want to litigate. You're agreeing to mediate any dispute. You're agreeing in good faith to enter negotiations. So you're really giving away your rights. You're not able to basically publicize the National Park Service gives tours in the historic district. And I'm really struggling to see what you're getting out of this agreement, but giving up rights in it when, you're the city, you can write an ordinance saying for governmental entities, these are the requirements. I think the other thing from just a pure legal standpoint, the Federal Torts Claims Act only applies to park employees acting in their official capacity. So people on the tour, these people just kind of rock up to the park. You don't know what their names are, you don't know where they're from, you don't have any information about them. They go on a tour, you get someone who, this is crazy scenarios, but slug someone that basically wrecks someone's property. You have absolutely zero claim against the federal government. You have no right to sue them, you have no right to get a settlement from them. It purely relates to employees in their official capacity. So again, even if a ranger creates a scenario, decides to trespass and does something to your property, they're probably not in their official capacity. And again, you have no redress. So I think that's where a big difference from a liability insurance. I'd have someone to sue if someone on this tour group basically did something or to my property. Here, no redress whatsoever. Second thing I would say is the 20 people limitation. It seems pretty easy to me. There's a sign-in sheet inside the national park. There is basically first 20 to show up. Sorry, we can't take any more. I mean, that happens everywhere. So, I would argue even with the 20 people, I mean, sometimes it looks like the runway on LaGuardia on a Friday night on Federal Street. There's a golf cart, there's a carriage, there's a walking tour. It just, maybe this is for another day, but it's gotten to be too much in a lot of ways. And I think, there's not, half the point doesn't have sidewalks. And the sidewalks are there, you know, and Oak is, you know, disturb them. There's zero parking enforcement, zero, absolutely nil, zero. You have people parking the wrong way, you have people parking on corners, in front of fire hydrants, in front of stop signs, so you have that. There's no place for 20 people to go. They're not going to the sidewalk, I can assure you that, they're going down the road. And our house, you know, it's our house, our front walkway and the marsh. And, you know, the Park Service used to be, you know, respectful and maybe on the corner of East and Craven and, you know, would, you know, talk about it there, which is great. Now they're coming down in front of our doorway, like the other walking groups, where you have 20 people that are right up getting pictures at our gate and everything. And we've tried to get out at times and some people don't want to move. We tried to get in at times. Some people say, wait your turn, you know, and it's like, well, it's my house, you know. So it's, you know, it's a problem at times. But, you know, the other thing I would say, again, not related to you folks, but, you know, the 7 p.m. cutoff for tours. Well, I'll tell you, this time of year, you got people giving tours and it's dark and you come around a corner and it's just a matter of time before someone gets hit. Someone's trying, even there in the daylight, trying to drive by 20 people in a street with cars parked on either side, helter skelter. So, anyways, those are my comments. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, I know it's not for discussion at this meeting, but you have this agreement and then, you know, you have the strategies appended to it. So, you know, I know that's for the future, but obviously it's just, you know, it's just kind of a Trojan horse for putting kiosks, putting waste stations, putting park benches. And, you know, for people who live there, we're the caretakers of history. We get that. You know, we spend a lot of money on our houses. We're subject to a lot of regulations, but this is not Colonial Williamsburg. This is a residential neighborhood. And to have a park bench or a, you know, or an information kiosk or something outside of our house, you know, it's just not something, you know, we pay a lot of taxes and we do a lot for what, you know, the city wants us to do, which is all fair. But we also pay for quiet enjoyment too. So, thanks. That's it.
Anyone else? Go back to this. Sure. My name is Eric Wells. This is very, very effective for us, National Park Services. We live next to the Robert Smalls house. And for over 25 years, we bought it from our auntie and uncle, another 20 years. So we've got over 40 years at 601 Prince Street. And I just need to know, I've listed the house for sale. My brother's all upset about it. I said, man, I'm not gonna stick around for this. Now, I know it was the previous administration what happened. I said, enough. I was not trusting National Park Services on what was happening. Now you, understanding that National Park Services may make an acquisition of the Barbara Smalls house, I need to know, because we're selling our house over this whole matter. I need to know from you all what the intention is, open tours, the motor coaches. Yes, in fact, there's a Gullah Greyhound motor coach, a Greyhound that went under our live oak tree, hit that, got around the bend. They got out, couldn't even make the corner of Prince and New Street. And the bus driver, she had everybody go straight to the Robert Smalls house. And I said, hey, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I know, you're the guy that we were warned about you, that you'd complain about the Greyhound here. I said, of course I am. This is a private residential neighborhood. And on top of it, there are other motor coaches too. There was a bus with a fellow that actually had a bulletproof vest. And he was giving tours at the Robert Smalls house too. And that's National Park Services. So I told my brother, I said, I want to put a plug on this thing. Now, if I had confidence, and I believe with people being open-minded, the motor coach thing is a big factor. Because there's no reason to have buses and everything going to Robert Smalls house. But having people going onto the property, I know when the previous owner had the property, but that was also filled with vote code violations to begin with. And so it got out to a rocky, I'm disappointed in National Park Services, being a federal organization, that actually embarked on an unlawful private contract with a private resident, the previous private resident of the Robert Smalls house. Beaufort Planning Code was at 1.3.3b. It's not even allowed, it's prohibited. And so so in other words, I want to see if we can move forward on this thing, because quite literally, we don't even want to sell the house. But if National Park Services continues the way they were before all this happened, yeah, we have to sell the house. So are you all working with the city to ensure
that we have our right to privacy. And I also want to know, what is the intention of the Robert Smalls house?
So, couple questions there. So
Yes.
the first thing related to motor coaches is those are private businesses that aren't working directly with us. So I'm not, if there are motor coaches, they're not related to what we're doing at all. Secondly, that's why I'm here, is to work with the city, work with the residents all over here, work with lovely folks like Linda, so that we can get all this figured out, so that we can put all that in the past. And I wasn't here for all of that controversy, but I recognize it, and I know it's frustrating, and I know it's weird when somebody in uniform and a funky hat shows up to town to act like they're in charge, and that's not what we're here to do. We're here to work with everybody, and that's hopefully what I'm bringing to the table. And all that to be said, we're not the owners of the property, and if we were to acquire the property, it would take a lot, I think, and I don't know the terms of the agreement that the property owner, the National Trust for Historic Preservation and Historic Beaufort Foundation have worked out. I'm excited to learn about the finalization of that agreement, as I'm sure we all are. And I'll be honest with you personally, as the superintendent of the park, you know, my goal in not just the Robert Smalls house, but any property, again, that has reconstruction related resources, is to understand the history, to be able to share that history with the public, and that doesn't mean acquisition and fee. That's a new model for the National Park Service that's happening, especially all over the southeast, places like Birmingham, where the motel there is being operated on a public-private partnership. So partnerships is something that that I personally and that we as the service are taking very seriously. We want to make sure that we're cooperating effectively with the folks that have been here for hundreds of years. When we as the federal storytellers are kind of late to the game, you know, I acknowledge that. But I also think we have a lot to bring to the table too, and I hope, you know, my hope is that we all give each other a chance to do really great things in this really incredible city.
Well, it'd be great to not put a for sale sign up again. And that is, a lot of it is based on National Park Services and how they address matters. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Driving?
And Conway Ivy, 501 King Street. I found out about this yesterday. And so I don't think the city has made a concerted effort to reach out to the residents of the Point and other residents that are contained in the Park Service to really talk about this issue. And so I was surprised when I saw this coming up. So I would suggest, and it's also suggested, since we still don't know what the result of the negotiations on the Robert Smalls house is, that this process be delayed slightly. You know, they said 2 weeks for the other, but I think you should step out and where you would involve the community to look at the implications of this. You know, Mr. Russell said, you're talking about, you know, kiosks and other things in terms of the residents. I think we have a template for that. Go back to the King Street drainage project. You came out, there was a group worked with the engineers, and I think we came to an excellent resolution. I think that same thing can happen here once we get all of the facts, and I would think you would be supportive of that. I'm not an attorney, but just reading English, it is not clear to me what authority the National Park Service would have to enter in this agreement. It's a part of the federal government, and they're really delegating some of their responsibilities under this general authority to take action. I think the other thing, the definition of what the park is not clear. When you read this, I see 65 acres, or you clarified in your remark, it's dealing with your 2 buildings or that. I think it ought to be made absolutely clear, because Mr. Scalati brought up all of those other approvals that have to be mentioned. You define it as the two buildings that the Park Service owns. That clause is moot, but I think it covers everything and I could have one reading. If I wanted to do an addition to our house or something, I would go through the normal city approvals and the HRB. But the city would have to go to the Park Service to get the approval or on a special event. So I think there's a lot of potential legal issues in this contract that should be looked at in detail on how the interplay works. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
One last comment, thank you. I think it's kind of becoming obvious just hearing folks talking in the group who may not want to stand up and speak, but Linda brought up a really good point. You've got carriage tours, you've got walking tours, you've got golf cart tours. I believe Heather mentioned you've got, the little shuttle tours that come on as well too. And they're all bound by the TMAC and the Tourism Management Ordinance. So they're bound by the Beaufort Code and everything they do. And that's why we worked with Linda to ensure that our direction working with the National Trust was going to meet that. And it seems to me that the National Park Service should be no different. And to take it from what Mitch said earlier, hey, we'll take it on our backs, but it's the city ordinance, and you just tell your superiors you've got to follow the city ordinance. And I think that's probably the best and easiest solution with it. Because if you think of the National Park Service's big brother coming in, and they're feeling that, well, we're not bound by the city requirements, and Laura's doing her best to work within that, at this juncture, and thank you so much for that. But I think for the city's protection and for also, understanding the wishes of the residents, it just really makes sense to enforce the ordinance that you already have on the books, and if you need to tweak it a little, tweak it a little. So,
Just to be clear, my comment, put it on the city's back was specifically and only related to the number of folks.
Oh, the 20 people.
20 folks.
yeah.
It didn't go beyond that and however that evolves, but my comment was specifically addressing the 21st and Southern Tour.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, but I still think that thought process, if everyone else has to follow those guidelines, it makes sense that everybody be on the same playing field. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Comment from council?
I could just to quickly recap some of the stuff that we heard. I would think an appropriate path forward, feel free to disagree here, would be to potentially re-engage TMAC to some degree and maybe look at identifying specific routes while we have construction, because we have in the ordinance what the routes are, but there was a point brought up with some of the stormwater construction that we have going on. Maybe it's worth reevaluating those routes. And then determining the impact that golf carts have now with the flow, because those were not really in operation in 2011. And then determine the number of participants specifically for the National Park Service. Look at the insurance coverage for participants, because it does say in here that it's specifically for the National Park Service's employees. And so ensuring that those who participate are also covered to some degree would be of value. And then I think it's a fair point that tours conducted after sunset could be dangerous. So maybe we have we change the time, or we sunset a tour's operating ability at sunset. Now, I think these things are probably better determined and evaluated with a committee who is made up of people who are more familiar with this than we are. It sounded like we had a good TMAC committee originally, and maybe some of the same members who were on it then would be willing to volunteer, but either way it goes, those are some of the major things that were highlighted to me in this.
They can do it, then we just update the ordinance, I think that was mentioned earlier. Needs to be updated.
Yeah, they could just consider updating the ordinance and capturing some of those concerns.
Well, back when,
So what I'm hearing is while we have the hood up, looking at the engine that is the ordinance that governs this, so we can accommodate National Park Service, we should just go ahead and take a look at everything while we're at it and make adjustments as needed while we're doing it. Is that pretty much where we are?
Kind of how I would take, yeah.
one thing back when 20-something years ago, we had the big buses that were going through, or the vans and everything that were going through, and so I think the golf carts would be a good alternative to those. Cause they're quiet, you know, without the big rumbling and everything that you have from
Yeah.
others.
No, I would agree. I just think maybe taking it into consideration as a different course of operation, and having the committee evaluate it.
So Laura, given that, are you under any particular timelines or expectations on the part of National Park Service?
This was all sort of us on a best faith effort to see how we could resolve some of the issues that Linda was so kind to bring to our attention, to make sure that, you know, legally, we can't 100% comply with the ordinances as written, and we can't take on insurance, for example. It's just not something that we can do as the federal government. So how can we fit within the framework, be in the spirit of the ordinance? You know, this was my first attempt at trying to get there. So happy to hear any additional feedback, or what's the best mechanism to make it happen.
I guess one point to that, could you have participants sign liability waivers?
I don't know. I'll answer that. I know if I was putting you in a canoe, I might. So I know it's possible, but how that impacts our regular interpreter programming, I'm not sure.
I don't believe in liability insurance from the tour companies covers their participants either.
But I can sue them for their participants' actions.
The tour
Cannot-
companies insurance.
You can sue
It's
the
happened
tour
in
companies, you cannot sue the carriage tour companies. The carriage tour companies are protected by state law relating to equine operation. We learned that a long time ago.
I gotta finish.
Because it's been out there, the whole liability issue has been out there being discussed for the past 30 years, easily.
Mayor, as staff action, we will take from this to,
One more hand back.
I'm sorry.
So my understanding, you're going to take another look at the notes. I'm Catherine Griffith and I live at 504 Craven Street. So am I understanding that now there's going to be a committee that's going to relook at the ordinance before making the approval for the national park to join the tours? And if you are going to relook at the ordinance, will there be an updating in terms of, I haven't stayed on top of what happens in the neighborhood through the council. And like Mr. Conway Ivy, I just heard about the meeting yesterday, but there is a lot of growth, and it just seems like all of a sudden you see another walking tour, all of a sudden we have golf carts. And on any given day, you may pull out of your driveway and you wait for the walking tour, and you go down the street to try to get on Carteret, but you're behind a horse and buggy, and then you turn a different street to try to get out of your neighborhood, and you're behind a golf cart. So while 6 tour companies don't sound like a large number, living there and having lived there almost 30 years, it becomes rather cumbersome and bothersome. So even to hear that 20 people is the limit to have on a walking tour, when you live in your neighborhood and you're bent over in your yard trying to pull weeds and 20 people walk down your sidewalk, and then on a walk, horse and buggy goes down the sidewalk, it becomes rather bothersome. So if there is another look at the ordinance, it might be nice to have input from the residents or the commercial area also. But thank you.
And that could be in the makeup of the committee itself. You could have business owners that are involved with the tours as well as residents in the neighborhood.
Let's take a look at what the previous makeup of the team is and then send it over. See if that suffices to that, not come back to these recommendations. And then recruit and advertise for new board members, and then you guys will go through different processes.
You can do that also with public engagement.
That's what this meeting is, by the way, it's public engagement. So this is step one of the conversations. It's not like we have kept information from residents to this point.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we're going to move on to the second item, discussion item, and that was the South Carolina 116 and S 597 DOT projects. JJ, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Mr. Keith Riddle from South Carolina DOT is here to present on this topic tonight. Council, this project was brought forward. It's a DOT project handled completely by DOT. It was brought forward to staff this summer. We were on our break for summer at the time. We were also redoing the way we were handling things, capital projects. We were onboarding Raul, and it sort of fell to the wayside. So some of the information, my background information is a little old. They did hold their first, or their public information meeting on August 1st, 2024 about this project. What they are asking for is a resolution for the project. It is attached in here. It's just a standard language municipal state highway agreement for DOT. With that, I'll turn it over to Keith and his team.
Mayor and council, thanks for allowing us to talk with you about this project today. We're glad to be here. This is my cohort, Greg Joy.
Appreciate your time.
So we're going to discuss the intersection of Laurel Bay Road and Stanley Farm Road and what we propose to do there. But a little background about what we do in my office. Our office administers the Highway Safety Improvement Program, also known as HSIP. This is a federal program that makes money available for safety improvements throughout the state. So we focus on improving safety, mainly at intersections, but also at some other locations too. And we also try to improve the traffic operations at the locations there. So for a location to be eligible for HSIP funding, it must address a priority in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which in this case would be intersection safety. And it must be identified through a data-driven process, and it must contribute to the reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes. The data-driven process means that we track everything about the location. We know the number of crashes, how severe they are. We know what the most cost-effective countermeasure is, and we also do a before and after study on every project to make sure what we do is working. Intersections are some of the most dangerous locations on our roadways. See here, 27% of all fatal and serious injury crashes occur at intersections. Intersections are necessary, but they're just inherently dangerous because you have a lot of conflict points there and lots of possibilities for vehicles to hit other vehicles. So our office is interested in reducing the crashes that are occurring at these intersections. This is Laurel Bay Road and Stanley Farm Road. A bit of information about the current state of it. Laurel Bay Road is a 2-lane major collector with about 7,100 vehicles per day, 3% of which are large trucks, and it has a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And Stanley Farm Road is a 2-lane local road with around 1,650 vehicles per day, 5% of which are large trucks. And to put that in perspective a little bit, Trask Parkway on US 21 is about 25,000 vehicles per day. At I-95, it's about 56,000 vehicles per day. Then a bit about how this intersection got on our radar. The intersection has a higher than average crash rate. And we get information on locations all over the states, and we have a group that analyzes crash data to find these locations. So in a recent 4-year period, there were 19 total crashes, 16 of which were right angle crashes. And these right angle crashes are the main ones we're concerned about because they have the potential to be really severe and cause an injury or a fatality. And here, 10 of the 19 crashes caused an injury, and there was one crash that caused a fatality in that time. So after it got on our radar, we initiated a project and got it approved by our commission to start on it and proceed with an analysis. We hired an independent third-party consultant to do a traffic study for us.
And that traffic study was completed a few months ago. The traffic study looked at 3 alternatives. It looked at an always stop, a new traffic signal, and a single lane roundabout. And the traffic study showed that the roundabout was the safest option. And a roundabout is just a circular intersection which traffic flows counterclockwise around a center island. There's no traffic lights or stop signs at a roundabout. All approaches are controlled with a yield sign. And we do design all roundabouts so that large trucks and emergency vehicles can navigate the roundabout safely. And these roundabouts are starting to replace traditional intersection improvements because they're safer and they can enhance the operation of the intersection as well. And what makes a roundabout safer is the reduction of conflict points. A conflict point is anywhere a crash can occur between 2 vehicles. Like if someone's traveling eastbound on Laurel Bay Road and turning left on the Stanley Farm Road, and another vehicle is traveling westbound on Laurel Bay Road, that's one of these conflict points. And you can see from the graphic on the left that a normal intersection has 32 conflict points, if you add all those up. And the graphic on the right shows that a roundabout reduces that number from 32 to 8. And the 8 that do exist aren't crossing conflict points. They're diverging or converging. So those tend to be not as dangerous as the crossing conflict points. So even when there is a crash, it's more like a side swipe crash instead of like a right angle crash. You can see from this slide, we do have some experience with these roundabouts. Just our office alone has installed 35 roundabouts throughout the state, with 20 more under development or under construction. There's several other offices and local municipalities and things like that have installed some roundabouts as well, but these are just the stats for our office. And the dots on this graphic show where we have roundabouts. You can see that pretty much all over the state. We do get a couple of questions with a lot of these roundabouts. Usually, why are you putting this way out here in this rural area? And why are you putting this roundabout on this high-speed route? Those are 2 of the questions we get on most of these. These roundabouts are designed to be on high-speed routes. That's the whole goal of the roundabout, is to get everybody slowed down when they're approaching the intersection. So hopefully the crashes won't be as severe. So our office has been installing these for about 15 years or so. They all perform well at reducing crashes. We get an average of 66% total crash reduction after putting them in. Injury crashes are reduced by 79%, and fatal crashes are eliminated entirely. And these stats are all derived from our before and after studies. For every location, we do a before study and analyze like 3 years of crash data. And then after the roundabout is built, we go back in and do an after study, which looks at 3 years after we put it in. So averaging all those after studies on the roundabouts gives us this information. Our office has installed a roundabout near the intersection. It's at Joe Frazier Road, at Pine Grove Road, which is about 2.5 miles away, and that was completed in August 2012. The roundabout we're proposing to put here would be similar to this one. We did a before and after study on that one, and it's doing well. It reduced total crashes from 17 to 3, injury crashes from 7 to 1, and right angle crashes from 14 to 0. And I mentioned earlier that we looked at an always stop and a traffic signal for this. The always stop is a safer option than what's currently there, but it just causes too much delay, too many traffic backups, since there's so much more traffic on Laurel Bay Road than Stanley Farm Road. And we did look at a traffic signal as well, but the roundabout is the safer option because they remove conflict points where a traffic signal doesn't. There's also federally mandated traffic signal warrants that have to be met before installing a traffic signal, and none of those warrants were met here. There are locations where a signal is the best option, but this wasn't one of them. And if you install a signal where the warrants aren't met, you can sometimes increase the traffic.
Yeah, can you explain what a warrant is?
Warrant, it's in this manual called the MUTCD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And all the warrants are pretty technical, but it has to do with the existing traffic that's there. For us to install a traffic signal, it has to meet the conditions of one or more of those warrants.
So in the bottom here, the costs are similar between a roundabout and a new traffic signal. Is that mainly the construction cost of the roundabout?
The life of the project, really. Like the traffic signal would be less expensive at the beginning, but when you take power costs into account over 20 years, it ends up being kind of a wash. And the current status of this project, we've developed preliminary plans, they're under review. Those plans allowed us to create this graphic here of what it might look like. We did hold a public meeting for the project on August the 1st at Burton Wells Rec Center. We had 10 attendees and received 8 comments. And I think I received 4 comments through email as well. So if this moves forward, we would complete the design and start the right-of-way acquisition process in early 2025. That would take about a year, and we would hope to start construction early 2026. It usually takes around 18 months to build, and this would cost around $2.5 million. The project does have a website. We update it periodically. Take a picture of that or scan it. There's all this information that's on there, and you can zoom into the graphic and all of that.
With the new bike lane they're putting in, would this affect that anyway?
Yes, sir. We would have to cut that part out during construction, but we would put it back, obviously, when we were done.
If they come across at a roundabout, how would that happen?
It would be north of the roundabout. It would be across
Stanley Farms on that side. Go back to that last picture. I think you actually have it where it
Yeah,
comes in and it goes up, the purple.
The
crossing would be
Yeah,
right.
the
Purple
top
goes up
is-
to a less area, and actually the crosswalk crosses over the median portion that goes on beyond. It's like the one outside City Hall. It's not really, it's roundabout, but it has that turn lane.
Pedestrian cutout.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and we've talked with Beaufort County about that too. They're gonna send us their design files and things like that, so we can.
There's gonna be some sort of flashing light there or something to get the traffic aware that there's bikes crossing there.
It's possible, yeah, it's possible we could increase the warning there to get the pedestrians across.
Yeah, because I can see folks coming in there concerned about folks zipping around the circle and not seeing that the
That's why I
bike
see
thing
it's
is over there.
concerned too.
Yeah,
So think about.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons they moved it up Stanley Farm, away from Oral Bay, there would be less traffic going that way.
that's right.
You have to have any detours while you're constructing the roundabout?
We're not positive yet, but even if we do, there'll be pretty short-term detours. It won't be anything long-term at all. We usually don't need them. And actually here, there's a good bit of pavement to work with because there's already left turn lanes out there. Probably won't.
Have you guys already looked at what the right of way acquisition would be for this particular project?
We have.
Cost wise?
No, just in general.
We have, most everything would be within existing right of way. There would be 2 small triangles on the north side, one on the property to the northwest and one on the property to the northeast. But I think the grand total ended up being like 0.03 acres, is what we'd be asking. Everything else would be within our existing right of way.
That just assume that if this is 2.5 million federally funded in today's dollars, and this started in 26, if the cost was a little different, they'd still be federally funded. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question for you, it's kind of a general question. Is there some type of natural aversion to roundabouts?
Well, we experience it some people like them inherently and some don't inherently. And, you know, when you first go through them, there is like a period of getting used to it. So like 2 or 3 times going through it, you know, people seem to get the hang of it. And the crash stats, you know, they kind of speak for themselves. I mean, every time we put one of these in, the crashes go way down.
What about Bluffton?
I'm not familiar with,
That one's a mess.
I'm not familiar with that one. That did come from our office.
Yeah, well.
There's 2 of them.
Yeah, and a couple on Hilton Head. For these rural areas, we keep ours very simple. It'll be single lane.
The new Riverside is that's much better, than the old intersection of 46. It's wide. Yeah, it's very good.
Like the one on Ladies Island has been effective.
Yeah, Sandspot Road is done very well.
The one over by Gardens Corner has worked well.
Is there any,
Sort of, it's a blind spot there if you're pulling off of 17 and you gotta yield. If you don't yield, you could get.
I'll just say what I know Nate's thinking back there. He's probably thinking that a traffic circle means I don't get caught out in the middle of the night.
is there, I'm assuming in the conversations from the standpoint of expansion, the Laurel Bay Road isn't slated for any kind of enlargement.
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
Of course, they have the federal government has a huge right of way around that.
We, in the traffic analysis, I think we tried to predict what the traffic was gonna be like in 2046, and it's very kind of steady.
It would make sense. I don't think there's huge amounts of development capabilities out there, and all to the air station is pretty static. So,
Any comment from council or any of the public? Brad?
I've got a question. You said there was like 12 comments that were submitted. Were they positive? Were they negative? Combo?
Three or four of them were negative. There were a few comments that didn't pertain to this project at all, you know, they just say, we should be doing something down the street. There were a couple of those comments, and there were a couple positive comments as well.
Couple of negative, a couple of positive, and a couple didn't apply.
Yes, and that's usually how it goes.
What would the negative?
it's not like the roundabouts, or
They pretty much said it's a dumb idea, left it at that, they didn't.
I just have an observation. I lived on Hilton Head for a number of years, and there's a roundabout in Sea Pine Circle that's been there for years. And as you might imagine, it's used not only by residents, but by all those tourists. And you know what? That roundabout really works. It really works. I had one experience one time many years ago, meeting somebody coming the wrong way. Oh, and that gets your attention. But truly, with as many people as there are, not just American tourists, but tourists from all over who manage that roundabout very well.
Yeah, one
That's
thing
the
I-
native that you spent in.
You guys didn't cover in here that people like about the roundabouts too, if they're looking at the science of it, is the fact that it reduces the emissions. So I know with cars turning off and restarting now, maybe that's another way to resolve that issue. But some of the studies that I've seen show that it reduces the emissions by up to 30%.
That's right.
So, and that's,
roundabouts do.
what's that?
The
The roundabouts do, because it just keeps things moving.
Yes.
Yielding,
Yeah.
right.
So lots of times you may not have to stop, you come to the roundabout.
Speaking for older people, which I'm one of them, I'm not a big fan of roundabouts. I said a version back there.
I am shocked by that.
Well, then I'm old.
I've been careful, there's St. Martin, I think the Dutch side, there's no traffic lights, all roundabouts. And people are zipping scooters and mopeds and whatever, cars, and it just works.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I asked the question about the aversion, because every place I've been, especially in Europe, it seems to work so well, but when you mention it, people say, I don't like roundabouts if they get this. Why?
That's what we think. And one of the things that hurts us is the inconsistency with the roundabout design. There may be a neighborhood that puts one in and people think that's what we're putting in. They may have seen one in London and they think that's what we're gonna put in. But these are all very standard. We have a full design team working on them. And we build it for rural areas. This won't look like the one going around Big Ben. Right?
There's a few in Paris that.
Big Ben problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But probably still less accidents than a traffic light. Because it does slow you down, right?
That's a traffic sharing measure.
Yeah. You're not going 50 when you get T-bone, right?
This is Mitchell, to answer your question too, if you ever want some bedtime reading, chapter 4C, and then. Kind of like sitting like that. That's your traffic signal.
We learned a lot during the Boundary Street master plan, because they were planned to have traffic signal in front of us here. And then at 170 and Highway 21. And in the review of it, the one here is too close to the intersection of Morris Drive. And it would not have worked. And the one at 170 and 21 did not function the way it was designed, because of the amount of left turns and right turns that are counter to each other from the standpoint of the use of the traffic circle. So traffic lights were left in place. So.
Council, if there's no other questions for DOT, we will bring the resolution forward to the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
How about drive out to Columbia or whatever?
Yes, sir. It's not bad. Not bad, yeah.
Watch out for the money.
Yeah. We gotta bring that up.
Okay, next on the agenda is the CIP ARPA funded project update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is just a quick update on our ARPA funded CIP projects. We're gonna be taking a much more in-depth look at all of our capital projects on November 22. We have a special work session. It'll be our quarterly capital improvements workshop that's dedicated just for capital projects. So we'll be doing the deep dive at that point. We just wanted to give council quick updates of where we are on some of these projects. Attached to your agenda, you have a memorandum that gives these bullet points. But the downtown point stormwater projects, they are all still on schedule. We don't know that they will be bid before the end of the year, but because we are considered sub-recipients of those ARPA funds through the state grants, the SKIP grant and the SCORE grant, we don't have to worry about that deadline. They do still have to be completely used. The project's completely done by December of 2026. And we believe the engineers and the state that will definitely be able to make that, even if we go out to or under contract first of the year. The Battery Shores Stormwater Project, we met with Davis McLeod today. And the plan is to have both the Battery Shores Stormwater Project and the Duke Street Streetscape and Stormwater Projects out for RFPs this week. That would conclude the week before our December council meeting, and we would ideally be bringing you contracts to look at the December council meeting. Both of those projects do still have permitting points that have to be done. That's utility coordination for the Duke Street project. But the engineers were confident with going ahead and getting those out to bid and getting us under contract for that. Pigeon Point Boat Landing. We had an RFP for design build services that closed on October 31st. We received one bid, and we are currently in discussions, reviewing that in discussions with the bidder about pricing. The overall pricing proposal came back higher than expected. We're looking at the different options. That RFP was put out for design build for the boat ramp, the dock, and master planning, so it could be separable for the design and the build phases for each part of that. So it gives us a lot of room to work with the bidder. Pigeon Point Playground, we have a community survey that's going out. We've been working with the state procurement contractors to get some design ideas, and the goal is to bring all of that to council in the December meeting again. And that project is coming in under budget. Carnegie Library repairs. If you'll remember, council, that project has been out to bid several times, and we've had various issues from the pricing coming in much higher than anticipated, to concerns about the ability of the bidders to do the work that's needed on a historical structure. We do have some potential concerns with the roof being one of the issues. We have some concerns with the air quality potentially in the future. So we are exploring emergency procurement options under our current code. And I've been doing all the talking, but you now have an actual CIP director who's been taking the lead on that with Linda, and he can give you kind of a quick update of where we're at on that.
The roof of the library, we're currently awaiting pricing from the old source that we have found for the tiles on that roof. The tiles are actually manufactured in Germany, and there's one company, I want to say it's in New Hampshire. I have the state wrong, but they're the only ones who are manufacture that tile here in the United States. So the contractor is currently waiting on final pricing so that they can kind of give us the estimate of what that's going to be like.
This is a partial repair of the roof or a total?
So,
Total repair.
I thought we were using the same tiles, right? And then just something with the mortar underneath you're replacing?
We're using some, but we're gonna have there's gonna be a loss in the process as well, so we're acquiring enough for the repair and extra just in case.
The waterfront park engineering services, we received 3 bids on that. The committee reviewed the 3 bids. We interviewed the top 2 qualified bidders, and the top qualified bidders selected. CIP team is currently engaging with them on pricing and phasing because we don't know what they're gonna find when they get in there. So they are breaking that down into phasing. And that they plan to have the pricing and their phasing recommendations to us to be discussed at the November 26th meeting. That's gonna be, I've saved that for last on our proposed agenda for the 26th because I figure that's gonna be a pretty big conversation.
This was the name of that top bidder available to release now, or you want to wait?
It's public information, it's mixed one. They partnered with several other engineering firms. They brought in a team that really impressed our team. Raul was part of that process. He wants to tell you how the process went.
For the engineering,
Yeah.
They're pretty thorough on what they were able to see, what they found. So McSweeney is highly confident that this group of engineers will be able to get us to where we need to be and take us to the right company to get those repairs done. So kind of where we're at right now, still in a review and still reaching out to the potential contractors to get that work done.
I'm just curious, do we have an issue with the critical line? Because that's a relieving platform and there's a critical line, the water goes underneath, and I don't know if OCRM or whoever is involved in all this stuff, if they're gonna be hard and fast on that, whether we can put a coffer dam and backfill and.
That's a part of the options.
Okay.
That they will bring to you. As a reminder, the RFP was kind of a modified master plan design services. The first phase of this is a full assessment and saying, bring back, here are the options that we can have moving forward. And here's the timelines and the potential costs that come with those, so that we can make an informed decision and plan for the financial burden that that'll be.
I guess the timeline, or you might have the option there.
We don't, that's what they're working on right now. I'm hoping they'll have some more timelines to discuss on the 26th of what they think each phase will take. But again, when they get in there, we don't know exactly what's gonna come of it. So, yes, sir.
I don't know how to ask this question, so it'd be probably kind of naively asked. So being that we don't know a lot of what is going on under there, is one of the phases just a purely explorative phase?
That'll be part of phase one.
So that'll be part of what we do first.
Scooty's pretty familiar.
Yeah.
Well, I remember his comment that he was on his belly with tank. He couldn't even get under there, so.
Yeah, the larger question would be, what are we doing about it? Are we trying to repair? Are we looking at some type of replacement? And that's really why we want to hire this engineering firm, is to take us through what are our options? What makes the most sense? Are we repairing tile by tile? Are we exploring another method altogether other than relieving platform? And those are the kind of questions we would like this engineer to help us answer.
And would they know, or would the scope of their work include modern approach to what we have there now, 65 years old, from the standpoint of what we can do? Absolutely. And what techniques might be better for us to do as compared to the tile and get rid of it?
We hold them all options on the table. We need to know what can be done practically speaking in this situation, because it's gonna be a major undertaking.
We'd like something more than just a 50-year solution, which the initial life of the structure was. Should be able to get there.
So that'll be a big discussion on whether. The last project we had that was ARPA funded is Battery Shores paving. This is one of the things that was identified in work session a couple of months ago now. county entered into or signed, approved an MOU, memorandum of understanding, intergovernmental agreement to provide those paving services on their existing contract. The quote came in just under budget. I want to commend Nate for that quote. I was worried that it wasn't going to be quite what it needed to be, but we went out, they walked, they did a very thorough job on that, and that memorandum of understanding is on the regular agenda tonight, and I'll be presenting that to you.
You know, when they can begin.
They're planning on January.
So as it appears, the battery storage paving and the battery storage stormwater are not going to be synced. The standpoint of, you know, probably down for stormwater.
The stormwater doesn't require any underground. No, sir. It is work on the retention pond portion and then extending the outfall, so it won't affect the pavement very much, sir.
One question on the roof.
Yes, sir.
That was the last bid that went out, it was separate from, like, the roof was separate from the inside work that needed to be done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The concern with that last bid was the Metters, our consultants, were concerned with the references. We had some major concerns with their ability to do the work on a historic structure with this type of tile.
Can we just like get a lot of glue and just pull that out of the roof?
Who did the work last time?
Linda,
When the roof,
who did the roof work on Carnegie Library the last time it was repaired?
wasn't that only on the dormers?
No, it was the whole roof because it went from,
Well,
the whole roof, it went from shingles to,
when the
to
tile was
clay.
reinstalled.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly who it was.
That's been a while though.
I guess my point is,
Yeah,
have
that was
we
a
reached out to them at all to see if maybe they would be able to do it, or?
I'm,
If they changed it, I'm not sure we want to.
Well, how long was it? Good point.
it's
I mean,
not under warranty, it was not under warranty from what we were told, and, I would not, they were not, you could tell by their workmanship that I would not hire them again to do any of it, because it should not have failed at this juncture, at this year's. This should last us much longer than that.
The good news is that the contractor that did place the bid to do this work, the Metters folks were really happy with what the conversation was. They did the reference checks, so they're really confident that they can do exactly what we need them to do and what they say they're going to do.
We just need to find the tiles.
So, well, he's already found the tiles. He's just waiting for the pricing for it.
On the different landing, I'm assuming the master planning that's being considered from the standpoint of the design, build and so forth, that's what the survey was asking or questioning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That was, I mean, the survey was pretty much focused on get the boat ramp and the ramp.
Yes, sir. That's why we did the several design build for each portion, so that we could move forward. If they go ahead and start on the boat ramp, then we can keep diving into the dock. Then we can start looking at the master planning. Any other questions?
How about any questions, comments? Hearing none, I'm gonna.